ago and said we're going to wait a couple minutes for everybody to join. We have a 30-minute presentation here, and I think 28 minutes is probably enough time to get through it. So we'll go ahead and get going. First, welcome. This is a presentation on ending multiple identity confusion with what we are calling identity as a service. That's not a RapidScale term, not a Cox Business term, but an industry accepted as a service. And my hope and goal for this as a whole is that at the end of it, you at least understand what identity as a service is, and maybe how to identify opportunities that your customers and prospects can benefit from this particular type of service. We aren't going to go into the weeds on how it's implemented, not even really how it's quoted. It's really more about understanding the concept and the benefits. And my name is Dylan Bowders. I run the solutions engineering team here at RapidScale. My team are the kind of half experts of engineering and half sales. Really what our charge is, understand all of the products and services that we have and understand the value that we can bring to prospects and to businesses. So we kind of sit between the engineering team that has all of the really smart people that do the implementations, and then the sales team that have the relationships, whether that be on the Cox Business side or with our partner community. Just real quick, the webinar is being recorded. It will be available within 24 hours. An email will be sent out by Summer and Nikki and the marketing team. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, please use the WebEx question and answer chat window. Summer will be moderating that and bring those up once we get towards the end. So the identity landscape, what does that mean? And if you came to this webinar without any idea what identity as a service is, this probably doesn't help a lot. End users have dozens of logins. You would know this as a personal user. You have logins for your bank. You have logins for Dropbox. You have logins for all types of things. Uber, food delivery services. I mean, you name it. I personally have in my personal password manager probably 1,000 or more logins. It's pretty intense, but I'm keeping it managed there. But they're not tied together. There's not really a concept of doing that from a personal perspective. But in the business world, we do have ways of doing that. So you may have a local application within the business. There may be a SaaS-based application in the cloud and other types of environments. And what becomes less of it's not just an inconvenience for a user, but it also creates a pretty significant security risk for a business. So this really is almost as much of a security solution and concept as it is making the IT administrator's life easier as well as the users. That's kind of a double win. So the challenge is that you have this painful and disconnected experience, and like I said, it adds risk to the business. So what is the solution? And having a technology that can tie each of those disparate systems, wherever those systems may be, to a single management interface and management console is ultimately the best end state. So we want to ensure that the person that's logging into this application is who they claim to be. We want to make sure we can control access and access to specific resources based on what that system is. And then we also want to ensure that they not only have access to that particular application that might have applied to goal 1 and goal 2, but you're going to have that same challenge across multiple identities. So not that we have a poll, but I want you to think to yourself, think about your business, maybe some of your prospects or customers' businesses, and how many different systems and identities, meaning a login, how many different logins do you think they have to various systems? And I have a number for you. It's 27 on average, based on Intel security. and their assessment of various businesses. That may seem high, but I think if you really start to dig in, you'll see that it doesn't take long to get to 27 applications with a combination of applications hosted on premises. Some of those may be synchronized. You have applications that are not synchronized that may be on premises. You have hosted services like, say, RapidScale Desktop as a Service. And then you look off to the right and multi-cloud, public cloud services, and there's some various examples there. Salesforce probably being the most prominent, I would imagine, but also things like Office 365. There's different logins for each of those things unless you are taking advantage of an identity management system. So this slide here is really intended to provide some context and potentially help understand the confusion that can come, especially if you're the IT person and you're the person that's liable and responsible for all of these different systems. How do I make my life easier? And how do I reduce risk to the business by giving a user a single login that they can access all of these systems? So a little bit of an animation here. We have a single user, and we've got all of these different various systems. And outside of the systems that we provide for these individual users from a business perspective that are authorized, we also have shadow IT. So what are users doing outside of what the business tools that have been provided to them? What are they doing outside of that to make their life easier? And sometimes more convenient also means more risk to the business. So you have a challenge with managing passwords, managing password rules. You may have multi-factor authentication for some systems, and multi-factor authentication means you have a username, you have a password, which is something you know, and then you also leverage something you have, which is like a cell phone. And you combine those two disparate ways of gaining information, like, again, your brain, which is your password and your username, and then you have your phone, which means someone would have to steal the password that's in your brain and the phone that's in your hands in order to effectively gain access. And by having that, it significantly decreases security threat. And then just policy management. And one of the things I ask my guys when they first come on board is, do you have a personal password manager? Not a lot of businesses push for that within their employees. It's something that I personally recommend for anyone that has multiple logins. That's the way that I manage and manage my sanity when it comes to having access to multiple environments. And every single login has a different password. I don't know except maybe one password. I have one password basically, and I don't need to know the rest of them. Now, that's good to have from a personal perspective, but this is a challenge that goes beyond just the person remembering their password. It's how many different logins do I have to get to these different systems? So you have multiple IDs, and you have potentially multiple locations. So this is a typical organization. This is not necessarily expanding on how bad it can get, but this is pretty general and pretty applicable to most businesses and the landscape that we're seeing anytime we get into a company's IT environment. All right, I'm going to slide that guy over, and this is what we're going to do when it comes to solving that problem. Is we're going to have all of our different applications. Nothing's really changed from that perspective. We have one identity. We're enabling multi-factor authentication, so we're not only aggregating all of these logins so that we only have one username, one password, but we're also adding multi-factor authentication with single sign-on. You have all these multiple services, Office 365, SaaS-based applications, Salesforce, WebEx. Obviously, we can go on and on with the different types of services. It could be a voice application. It could be a productivity tool. It could go on and on. And what we're able to do is provide consistent policy management, consistent user add and deprovision by having these policies in place. Now, the IT person doesn't have to go and add a user to 27 different systems. They already have that connectivity and those policies in place. So when someone is added into Active Directory, they have access to the things they're supposed to have access to. And we can control that with group policy. So what are the benefits of IDaaS? And I've kind of touched on some of these. It expedites the onboarding process. So when somebody comes into the organization, as I mentioned, you're able to bring them on board considerably faster with much less effort. You can also control their access from a single point as opposed to 27 or more, maybe a little less, different systems. You can integrate that into most web-based systems, most on-prem-based applications can be adapted to these services these days. If they don't have native functionality that adapts them, we have ways of deploying these overlay systems to those. And then centralized management of passwords and policies, as I've been talking about, it really, again, reduces the threat landscape of the business, but also creates a more efficient IT environment. So what is RapidScale IDaaS? We're offering this obviously as help to customers to manage the user identities across all these different disparate environments. It is based on Microsoft Azure and Active Directory. So we're taking advantage of the integration that, or I should say, of the base technology that most businesses are already using, which is Active Directory. And we're tying that into Azure Active Directory and SSO so that it's really just an extension. And there's different packages and there's different, I guess you'd call it versions of the technology to enable IDaaS. It can either be, well, actually the next slide we'll talk about that. Password consolidation and then options for identity services. So what are the plans? And I don't want to get too deep into the different plans because, again, I'm not really interested in teaching you how we quote it. It's really more about what's available and making sure that you guys understand what the options are and how to position it, how to identify the opportunity around having multiple logins and what kind of pain that's bringing to the business. And maybe your foot in the door is we can simplify your onboarding process, but at the same time, we're going to significantly reduce the threat landscape around, or the threat surface around your users. And employees inside of an organization, if we take a real quick step back and look at security and exploits within a business, the majority of them stem around the employee. The employee accidentally clicking on something, or the employee writing down their password, or picking up a thumb drive, or using their personal email on business platforms that maybe don't have protections for what might come through personal email. It really boils down to the employee. So if we go into an organization and we start doing some discovery and consultation around how are you protecting the business from your employees and potentially enabling your employees to be more efficient, we can uncover a lot by coming at that angle, as opposed to we've got an email filtering solution or we've got an identity solution. That can be confusing. We come at it from an angle of how can we help the business and solve some of their pain points and also reduce their risk going forward. So we have basic and premium, as you can see from the slide here. There's no point in me reading off the slide, but basic identity does give you some functionality. It doesn't give you all of the conveniences that premium would. It doesn't give you as many synced applications as premium would, but it's something that we can deploy and the business can start realizing some of the benefits pretty quickly and with a very low cost to entry. Premium identity isn't exactly a high cost to entry, but it is there's a recurring fee based on how it's bundled into different products and services. So in general, there are other companies that offer identity as a service by RapidScale. If you're on this call, you probably have done business with us, and you probably have some familiarity with how we do business and the value that we can bring to a company besides identity as a service. But obviously, we'd like to be able to get a foot in the door with whatever resonates the most with a particular business or customer of yours. We also want to ensure that we're attaching to the value proposition that the customer really identifies with. Just because there's 30 benefits to a technology doesn't necessarily mean the customer is going to identify with any of them as a value to their business. It's a perceived value. So we want to ensure that we're hitting on that and really working towards highlighting what that is and showing that we can be a partner with that customer, with that prospect. So we have multiple management models, as some of you may know. We don't restrict knowledgeable partners. So IT individuals, IT stakeholders inside of our customers, we don't restrict them from being able to fiddle with the services that we provide them. We allow them access to the administration console. We have a single pane of glass within our RapidScale portal that enables a lot of that interaction. But while most businesses are scared of giving the keys to the customer because, well, what happens if they bump into their car in the parking lot? Now we have to fix it. We actually find that handing the keys to the customer and being a partner with them, as opposed to just a vendor, creates a considerably more desirable support experience and relationship, as opposed to just saying, well, okay, we're going to take this over and we're not going to let you do anything. We don't outsource really any of the things that we do. We take first level support on the majority of the services that we provide. So that provides a more consistent support experience when a customer calls in. We're not reselling services and taking that call and sending it off to another provider. We're taking that first level call, most times resolving it in that first call. But of course, we have a fantastic relationship with our vendors, and we can escalate to them if needed. We are not a transactional selling organization. Being over the solutions engineering team, if my guys can't bring to me why we're positioning the service, and it just turns out we're just positioning it to sell it, I've got a lot of questions. I want to understand why do we feel like this is going to be a successful engagement and a successful partnership. That doesn't happen very often. Typically, we're going in, we're understanding the pain points, we're being consultative, and we're positioning the right solutions to solve that company's problems. Our rapid response support team continues to just blow it out of the water when it comes to our NPS scores. So we've been slightly over 80, which is unheard of in our organization when it comes to transactional NPS, and the team's very proud of that. If you ever go to a restaurant, you can tell when the waiter is proud of working in that restaurant. Our support team is proud to be a part of this organization, and we're proud of them having the impact that they have with our customers. The identity crisis, it kind of stems beyond just identity as a service, but for businesses that don't know how to steer and navigate the complex technology landscape, that's what we do. We've got a ton of tools in our toolbox. We're adding more frequently, which makes my team's job even more challenging, but it also gives us more ways of solving customers' problems, and we're excited to be a part of that. And in general, if you think about the things that we do, we're really here to enable access to a business's application securely from anywhere, anytime, from practically any device. The word secure doesn't play into that, but there's a theme across all of the services that we have, and in most cases, we're providing a secure context around whatever that service is as well. So with that, we're 21 after. I got through that relatively quickly, and hopefully hit on the points where you guys at least understand what identity as a service is, understand that you may not be able to go into a customer and sell the service. That's not exactly what we're hoping to get out of this. What we really hope to get out of this is you being able to identify an opportunity where a customer has some pain points and where we can help, and then you bring that opportunity to our cloud solutions consultants we can sell with. You can hand it off to us, and we'll take it from there. And then my guys, of course, will get involved to dive into the weeds and ensure that the customer understands what it is that we're solving for them, what the technology is, what the expectations are around implementation, and hopefully at the end of the day, everybody's happy and we can continue to be a partner and expand into other services with them. So it looks like we do have a question here. First of all, good afternoon, Kat. Jules says, can data services or data and services be located in cloud and on-prem or on-prem or both? I mean, the general answer there is yes. We have quite a few services that are, of course, served out of our cloud, and we have our own cloud platform and 4 different data centers in the U.S., two internationally, and some of our services are hosted out of those data centers. We absolutely do have services that extend to on-prem. If we're talking specifically about identity as a service, it absolutely does tie that identity control, that aggregation of those identities from on-prem applications to hybrid cloud applications to SaaS-based applications, which are still technically cloud-based, but they are, we can solve for those as well. That doesn't mean we'll do anything on premises. There certainly are some limits to what we feel like we can do really well, and we're not trying to be everything to everyone, but we think we really understand well where we can excel, and some of that does extend on site. Hopefully that answers your question, Jules. Rodney, how do you become a partner? Summer can reach out to you and help you with that. We can put you in touch with one of our cloud solutions consultants, and that's really their primary role, is to introduce you to RapidScale and find out how we can be successful together. So we can reach back out to you, Rodney, and help you out with that. Summer, do we have any other questions?
I just saw a couple more pop up, actually. Is IDaaS a good selling point for a work from home solution?
Okay, I do see that from Gregory. Absolutely. I mean, in general, RapidScale services, while we would love for everything to go back to business as usual around the globe, we're able to help businesses work from anywhere. That's kind of our motto, almost, in a sense. So IDaaS is absolutely I think, key to making the work from home user more secure and more effective and efficient at what they do. So, some of that comes down to what applications are they using. But I feel like, we probably, in almost any situation, are going to be able to solve for 70, 80%, if not 100, of the applications that they use and tie that into IDaaS. And now the user isn't logging into 10 different systems a day. They're logging into one, and they pretty seamlessly go from one to the other. So again, that's saving time when it comes to working from home or anywhere for that matter. See another one here from Jules. Any limitations on country locations? Technically, no, not when it comes to how we position the product. Now, there could be some data export limitations. We would want to obviously navigate those waters kind of carefully to ensure that we're not crossing any legal thresholds, but these services are served, as far as IDaaS go, they can be served out of the US, they can be served globally, depending on the opportunity. So yes, being able to serve other locations besides the domestic US or US is absolutely an opportunity for us.
And Dylan, a couple more came in through the chat instead of the Q&A. The first one is, can you discuss how IDaaS ties into DaaS?
Absolutely. So with desktop as a service, and we have a couple of flavors, so I won't go into the individual technologies, but desktop as a service is very tightly integrated with Active Directory, which means in order to provision a user in desktop as a service, you have to create an Active Directory account for them. From that point, once they've been added into Active Directory, you have ways of controlling where they have access and what they have access to, how they have access from group policy, and we can absolutely tie desktop as a service into the identity as a service single sign-on and enforce multi-factor authentication as well. Multi-factor authentication can also have conditions. So for instance, if you're at the office and you're accessing the desktop as a service environment, we can forego the extra step of multi-factor authentication because we're 99.999% sure that person, if they're in the building and they've gone through physical security-based access into the building, probably okay to let them type their username and their password in to get into the environment. Now, if they're in Starbucks, we're little suspects. Let's go ahead and send them a code to their phone and make sure they can get in. So we can absolutely tie desktop as a service into IDaaS. That's one of those systems we can absolutely tie in.
Awesome. And we have time, so I'm just going to keep asking what's coming in.
Let's go for it.
Sorry if I missed this, but is this a standalone service or does it have to be purchased with another RapidScale service?
Really good question. And that kind of goes into how do you procure this type of service. And identity as a management, as a service, sorry, I keep wanting to say as a management. Identity as a service is for the most part bundled into what used to be called Office 365, now Microsoft 365 packages. It can be sold standalone. In most cases, what we would do is consult in that scenario and understand if there's an opportunity to provide one of the Microsoft 365 bundles so that we can provide more value and ultimately, as opposed to just trying to check one tiny little box for a little bit more, we can bring in some additional services in those 365 bundles that would include either basic identity as a service or the premier version of that.
Awesome. Do you have a UK presence?
We are in Amsterdam as far as our data center goes. That would not that should not suggest that identity as a service would be tied to where we have data centers, because it's not. It's tied to ultimately we'll call it the Microsoft Cloud and Azure. But if we're talking about, say, things like desktop as a service, maybe disaster recovery as a service, services that do tie pretty tightly to our cloud infrastructure, then Amsterdam would be the closest data center to the UK. And hopefully that helps.
Awesome. And right on time. It looks like that was our last question.
All right. Couldn't have planned that one better. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Summer, thanks for moderating and enabling all of this and helping me figure out how to get my voice through. I don't know what happened there, but we'll get it figured out for next time. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your morning if you're not on the East Coast, and a great rest of your day and afternoon if you're on the East Coast.